Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Trustee Open Forum. This is the first of two open forums. We will have another one in August in combination with our corporation annual meeting, which I know many of you are interested in attending. My name is Candy Maxwell, and I serve as chair of the Board of Trustees of the Chautauqua Institution. And I am here with many of my colleagues, current board members. And I would ask first that we take a moment that they would stand, that you might know who they are. If you would please stand, current members. These are the individuals. These individuals work tirelessly for you and for the benefit of the entire institution, and I myself thank them for their commitment and their dedication in all that they do to oversee Chautauqua Institution. Thank you. I will provide some brief introductory remarks followed by President Michael Hill. I have a couple of housekeeping items. Our meeting is scheduled for 1 hour, and due to other programs and activities at Chautauqua today, we will honor that timeline. I'll offer some brief opening comments followed by some brief comments by Michael, and then at the conclusion of these comments, we have 2 microphones set up to my left and to my right, and people can line up if they would like to ask a question or offer a comment. We respectfully ask that these questions or comments be shared in a way that allows for maximum participation by as many people as we can fit into this 1 hour. In other words, please be brief. If you have a mobility challenge that makes getting to a microphone difficult, we will assist in lowering the microphones to meet your scooter. We will conclude our forum today at 1 or just a little bit after 1. But we will be hosting various other group gatherings throughout the summer, as I mentioned before, including our annual corporation meeting, our strategic planning feedback sessions, and other modes of communication. And those will be listed in the daily and in electronic communications. One last thought. We have heard our speakers and preachers throughout these 3 weeks hold up Chautauqua's model of civility and dialogue. We are here to be as transparent and to answer as many questions as we can. And we hope that we can do that in a respectful manner that is the hallmark of what Chautauqua stands for. Just a few comments. The Board of Trustees centers its attention on 3 primary areas of focus. First, we're charged with overseeing institution strategy, and that means ensuring that the choices that are being made are aligned with our mission and our vision, and that the strategies are informed by sound data and information, and that our work is shaped and modified in view of both internal forces, but as importantly, external forces. The institution's strategic plan was developed with significant oversight and engagement by the Board of Trustees, and it was approved by the board in 2019. We monitor and evaluate the plan on a regular basis, and most recently, we reviewed the plan at our February work session. And as a result of that review in February, we agreed the current plan's objectives and cross-cutting initiatives remain relevant, and perhaps even more relevant as we look at the external environment around us. As we bring the first 5 years of life to the plan to the close in the near future, our focus will be on reviewing and approving the goals and the key performance indicators for the next 5 years of the plan. So more later on the plan as we move forward. We're also focused on governance and leadership, and this centers on 2 things. The first being the process of board development and assessment, which means that we are always concerned with whether we're organized to fulfill our charge. That includes things like constantly looking at board composition and making adjustments as needed to be sure that we have appropriate resources on the board to help oversee and guide the institution, obviously the leadership of the institution, and committees and practices. We are also responsible for retaining the president and reviewing his or her performance on a periodic and ongoing basis. We approve the annual performance goals for Michael, and we conduct a rigorous annual performance review process wherein we evaluate and we provide feedback to Michael to inform his continuing development as well as the organization's continuing development. And finally, we have a responsibility for fiduciary oversight. This focus encompasses areas such as risk analysis and management, compliance, policy, and finance. From this area of focus, we are attempting to understand the factors impacting the organization's performance in this post-COVID era. We consider multi-year budget plans to help us better manage and predict risk, and we are closely monitoring performance and mission fulfillment to ensure the continued stability and viability of the institution. As we pursue these three primary areas of focus, we also seek opportunities such as this leadership forum that allow us to, importantly, engage with the community and groups and individually, to pulse your perspectives on this work and to gain your insights and feedback. So again, thank you for being here and for the other opportunities you take to provide earnest and constructive feedback. And I'll now turn it over to Michael Hill.
Well, good afternoon and welcome. I want to thank Candy for her partnership and that of the Board of Trustees who are with us and those that were not able to be with us for their shared leadership. I also want to acknowledge the staff members that are here that have helped to craft and get us ready for this season and maybe here to answer some of the questions you have in their specific areas. I also want to thank all of you in attendance for the love and the care of Chautauqua that brings you here to this meeting on a Saturday afternoon. Couple of quick updates before we open up for Q&A. You may see I'm wearing this heart that our usher team passed out at the days following August 12th last year for people that they believed helped to open up Chautauqua again. And I mention that because Sir Salman Rushdie has started to speak again publicly. And in his first public address, one of the things he noted in receiving an award for courage was to hold out the courage of Chautauqua and Chautauquans who helped him. And so I want to thank you, and I hope that you had an opportunity to see his love expressed for you and all that you did for him on that really horrible day. Clearly, that incident has changed our security profile at Chautauqua quite a bit. And I want to thank everyone in the first few weeks as we've implemented new security systems and as we continue to learn how to better implement them as time goes on. And I wanted to share, because several have asked, and I've not had an opportunity to speak to everybody, but I thought this was an appropriate time to share that when you see increased security, in particular around the amphitheater, there's one of two reasons that security is present. One is either that artists, teachers, or preachers or speakers have requested it, and in many cases have mandated it for their participation here. And so when you see that security there, one of the byproducts of having a raised profile is that there's been new and specific requests from those that come to animate our stages. The other is that our security team has spent months partnering with federal, state, and local law enforcement, literally looking at the entire summer assembly season, and have made an assessment on particular events that they think might warrant some additional security for the safety of not only our folks on stage, but for each of you. We endeavor to have those perimeters up as little as possible, but I thought it might be useful to understand how August 12th has changed that profile. You will receive, if you have not already received, invitations to tours for our new Buildings and Grounds facility, and I want to thank 3 Chautauqua families who have paid for almost all of the construction of that facility. It'll allow us to clean up some of the old facilities that are there and hopefully make way for new developments here at Chautauqua. And in particular, I want to give a shout out to our Buildings and Grounds staff who worked so hard to make Chautauqua beautiful and to prepare it for us. I was pleased to be listening to Bree's presentation on recycling and to also hear the shout out for our climate change initiative and to be able to share $6 million in new philanthropy that came from relatively new donors to Chautauqua to endow that work. In addition to outside convenings, Mark Wenzler has really helped infuse science into our summer programming. I know our science group has shared that with me. You'll also see that in the National Parks Week. But what you may not also know is that Mark also oversees our lake conservation efforts and works around sustainability issues that are coming through new mandates at New York State, and so I'm grateful to him. Also grateful in regard to our lake work that our county has stepped up in a big way this year, donating $1.5 million of local dollars to help us continue the work that we started in the first 2 years, looking at issues around our lake health. We will put the supercomputers in the water this week, and I'm really proud to say that they're a new model of vertical profilers. When they go on Chautauqua Lake, the most advanced water measurement devices that exist on the planet will be on this lake starting next week. Lastly, before I do some overview on the letter that we sent, I want to thank the CPOA, who I know had their forum before, for their partnership around the economic impact study. I know there are several sessions coming up. I know Erica also offered some highlights, but I do want to respond to whomever it was that asked how we use that. That economic impact study has been a critical tool for us in our town-gown relations and was even mentioned by our county and state officials as a reason for them to invest by providing county dollars here at Chautauqua. So a lot of internal learning, certainly, a lot of reasons to celebrate our partnership as an institution with property owners, but also a reminder for our external community about the important role that this institution plays, and we will continue to use the findings of that study to help us as we look at county and state ways that our government might help life here at Chautauqua. So thank you to the CPOA for their incredible partnership. So as we've been sharing throughout this summer, and as you saw in the email that I sent yesterday, we've been on a 3-year journey through this COVID period. We had hoped that last year we would be able to emerge fully from our pre-COVID conditions, and certainly that was not the case. This has raised for us, and I know we'll spend a good chunk of time talking today about the larger question about how cultural institutions and communities like ours emerge from what has been 3 years of a pandemic. We have endeavored to do a series of webinars around our 2022 financial results, which we were deeply disappointed in, and endeavored to explain what they were and how we were navigating those, and hoped to put a good chunk of that in the letter yesterday. I was struck by the recent press we have seen from major institutions around the country who are facing similar challenges. The Met dipping $30 million into their endowment to shift focus to new works. And then just yesterday, the Public Theater, which is the home of Hamilton, for those that love that, announcing that they were taking a 13% layoff, taking their budget down from $60 million to $50 million. And I thought their artistic director framed nicely what many of us are wrestling with when he said, our audiences are down by about 30%. We have expenses up anywhere from 30 to 45%. And we've kept our donor base, but it's static. Put that all together and you get budget shortfalls, big budget shortfalls. And these are the folks who have royalties coming in from Hamilton, among other things. That is certainly a framing of what we are wrestling here at Chautauqua. Yesterday, we sent you a detailed letter about how we're endeavoring to tackle this period of life in our institution. We put a lot of that in writing in advance of this meeting because we wanted to leave more time for Q&A. So allow me to just on a top level summarize 3 things from that letter that I hope to reinforce here. One is about our financial position. The institution is on sound financial footing, and that soundness is the result of careful leadership and stewardship, extraordinary philanthropy from many of you, and creative problem solving. We go into this year with our cash position being among the strongest it's been, and we know that we need to be diligent about managing and maintaining that, and Candy and I will certainly share more about that. The second is around investments and decision-making. The changes that you've been hearing about this summer are designed to maintain that position of strength. The board and the current leadership team continues to design plans and strategies to help us emerge from this post-COVID era and to regain and exceed our historic drivers of success, those being program participation here at Chautauqua and robust philanthropy. And we're also endeavoring to create new drivers that can sustain and diversify our business to make it more sustainable. And you've seen that in infrastructure investments around IT, adding a pickleball courts, trying to get our themes out earlier so that people can plan ahead, and future investments that we'll be making in our Athenaeum Hotel and in hospitality to try to make the Chautauqua experience better. The third is questions of process and the pace of change. And we're engaging that conversation with you, not only in this forum, but in several breakout meetings. And we're endeavoring to give you not only line of sight into how we're making decisions, but also listening and taking your advice as we consider these changes that are under examination. And we're doing that through fora like this, weekly staff and attend experiences, if you've had a chance to see those, numerous webinars, both during the season and outside the season, email communications, and the many informal interactions we have while we're in the amphitheater, on the brick walk, and in private meetings. I will say that Chautauqua has always wrestled with change when it butts up against tradition. But like cultural institutions across the country, we know that we need to continue to adapt for this era in Chautauqua, and we look forward to doing that with you in partnership. And with that, I'm happy to open it up for questions that either Candy or I can handle.
Whoops. Oh, thanks for your comments. Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question. Many of us recently received this email that was very explicit, and it seems to be coming from a small cadre of people that no matter who the president of the institution is, no matter who is on the Board of Trustees, and quite frankly, no matter what the topic is, this group of people, including the previously anonymous Rick Rice, Chautauqua News, the ABC Group, they come out with these emails and comments with misinformation that kind of gets us all riled up and suggests that we should perhaps all grab our zip ties and storm the colonnade. So for the great majority of people that are sensible, what can we do to help you, to help the institution get through this tough spot?
Thank you for that. One of the first things I would say is if there's something that's happening that you don't understand, that you want more information about, please ask us. We spend a good chunk of time trying to clarify information that's not correct. We are happy to engage with Chautauquans who may disagree with policy decisions we're making, but I think we need to engage in those policy debates using the same information. The financial information I shared with you yesterday in my letter ties back to our audited financials. That's not something we sat down and thought, well, gosh, how do we paint this in the right way? So if you disagree with those, you're certainly welcome to contact our auditors at BDO, who look at our finances. So that's the first thing, is let's engage with each other around what's really happening. I would also say that part of it is being in dialogue about what we can or can't change. You know, I mentioned coming through 3 years of COVID, because one of the interesting things I think for cultural leaders is I think we're so eager to leave this period of COVID that we've even got some amnesia. You know, well, gosh, why was 2020 and 2021 so bad? Pandemic? You know, differences between our 2021 budget and our 2022 budget. Our 2021 budget was a hybrid budget. We didn't do a quarter of what we do here. So of course expenses went up by 25%. We were doing 25% less. So ask questions. And I would also ask, because I know we feel this way about all of the people that come to Chautauqua, the people that have been entrusted to manage the institution for this period of time love Chautauqua just like you. We're making decisions out of that love. To the extent that you disagree with the direction that we're taking it, it's not because we don't love it too. So if we could meet each other with a common understanding that we are all trying to do what's best for Chautauqua, and when we disagree on that, let's just figure out how to have that conversation. That's what would be helpful.
I think the other way, or the other perspective I might provide is, first of all, an understanding that in the face of COVID, and frankly in the face of just where this country is today, we are all facing some level of loss that's a result of change. And to acknowledge that and acknowledge the ways that it appears in all of our relationships, both individually and as a community. And I would say also that, as Michael referred, everyone wants the best for Chautauqua. I think that goes without question. And what that means very different things for different people. But in terms of the overall community, the norms of this community, what we desire to be as a community, the administration and the board cannot do that alone. This is up to every single individual to decide what kind of a community are we at Chautauqua, and who do we want to be, and who do we want to invite into our grounds as newcomers, as people who are interested in what we're doing, and then how do we express that in the most appropriate and in the most constructive way. And the only thing I can say is you all know the values of this place. They're in our strategic plan. And the old saying goes, if you see something, say something. It's no longer adequate to stand by and to experience behavior that you believe is incongruent with the values of this organization. And so I just encourage you to really think about who we want to be as a community and to protect that and to engage in it in a way that I think is constructive and is in reflection of the degree to which we love this place.
Hey, Michael. Hi. I'm glad I'm next because it's a real question that's a follow-on to the congruency, for one, and also the appreciation, if not love, we all have, can you hear me, for Chautauqua. So my question to you is this. Clearly, the pillars are what we're about. We all agree on that. What would it take to revisit the issue of recent cuts in the arts programs, opera, theater, other arts that we have? What would it take to revisit that issue and see if there isn't some other way for us to deal with losses?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. So a couple of things. Some of the cuts that you have experienced in the arts program this year will be back next year. So theater will be back, the School of Visual Arts will be back. The bigger conversation and more significant changes around opera. We in the administration and several board members have been in a series of meetings already with the Guild, with the Opera Company, with the Conservatory. And as Deborah has said multiple times, we've presented a different vision of what we think we can financially manage with opera, and we've invited comment. Candy and I were at a former board gathering, I guess 2 days ago, and Christopher Gibbs said, you know, I'm encouraged because I'm already seeing from version 1 to version 2 some significant changes. And I said, Chris, you're right, keep talking to us. You're gonna keep seeing significant changes as we try to figure this out together. So what I would say is keep talking to us around that. As I've said to anyone who has shared their love for opera, feel free to make donations to opera, feel free to attend more to opera. That will help as well, and we'll continue to craft that together. The other changes that you saw this year, you'll see restored for next year.
Hi, my name's Ann Trapasso. I know I don't need to disclose that, but for anyone that does recognize me, I think it's important for me to just disclose that I am here on my own free will. This is not my father, Kit Trapasso, prompting me to be here whatsoever. He's been the director of the beloved children's school program for the last almost 40 years. Sorry, I'm due to give birth in like 3 weeks, so I'm short on breath. So, I am someone who's been here literally my entire life, and I'm seeing a lot of changes, and I know changes can be hard. There's good changes, questionable changes, The thing I really have a question around is, I'm hearing about a lot of hires at the leadership level, hearing about, like Michael Hill just shared, deep sea, deep monitoring, water, great, I'm sure there's very specific reasons for those things. I'm going by the children's school and I'm seeing windows that are rotting, pieces of equipment that I literally played on when I was here as a 6-year-old. I heard about a camp counselor going through docks that were rotting at Boys and Girls Club. I literally represent the next generation of Chautauqua. Is there a reason that that isn't being given a little bit more love and care and, quite frankly, funds?
Yeah, thank you for that. So one of the things that happens in annual budgeting at Chautauqua is, and this has been on average most years for the past 2 decades, we budget about $3.5 million in improvements that we can logistically tackle in the warm enough months to do work here. John Shedd and his team do an assessment that starts with safety and then moves on to program impact from there. And each year, a set of projects bubble up from there that John and his team have ranked based on what they think is the most critical projects, recognizing that if we were to try to tackle all of the deferred maintenance that has accumulated at Chautauqua, it would be in the tens of millions of dollars. So there's a scale issue there that the board had a complete assessment done 2 years ago, and we continue to work through that. As we've talked with the board about, even if we had $10 or $15 million in any given year, we'd still probably be able to get to about $3.5 or $4 million because of available labor that's here in the winter months that we have. So just some context on that. As far as, and Candy can certainly speak to this because the board has looked at this, we have certainly added positions here at Chautauqua. It's not where I think most people think they were. So when I joined Chautauqua in 2017, there were 10 executive committee members, or executives here, including the president. There are 14 now, 7 years later. 2 of those are paid for entirely by philanthropy. 1 of those is an offset of bringing legal in-house, and 1 is entirely new. Where we have added significantly is where we call infrastructure building. So there was no HR department here at Chautauqua when I joined. In this era of what can be extremely litigious, let alone a difficult recruiting time to try to bring people to places like Chautauqua, we've invested there. We've invested $6 million in technology. We had 1.5 folks here working off AS400 systems. We've added technology folks there to help bring Chautauqua into an era where we can actually understand what's happening financially from a patron behavior perspective. We have added in places like our diversity efforts, and again, while that one's entirely philanthropically focused, the reason we have been adding in there not only is a mission-based reason, but also because we know we need to diversify our audience if Chautauqua is going to be sustained for the long haul. So the bulk of the positions have actually come mostly in the middle. The cadence of too many vice presidents has a lot to do with me retitling a good chunk of positions that were here when I got here. I've added 4, 2 completely covered by philanthropy, 1 an offset of legal, 1 I'll take the hit, completely a brand new position. Candy, do you want to talk about how the board monitors that?
I think first of all, let me note that we really do look at human resource investments as investments. And in many respects, there's nothing more important than the people that make the Chautauqua experience happen. And when you talk about wanting to preserve programming and wanting to preserve many other elements of what we experience here, it only is possible through the talent that we have. And we invest significantly in that talent. We take on robust practices under the guidance of the board to find the right people for the right job. We conduct systematic reviews of compensation under the guidance of our HR and Compensation Committee and our full board to ensure that we are in a position to retain the best talent. And you all know how expensive it is to replace people. And We also are concerned about continuing to provide the right environment for them to flourish, which means that Chautauqua flourishes. So I would just ask, when you think about headcount and when you think about people in senior positions, that this is through a very extensive process of understanding and then responding to what we believe are the most critical needs of the institution, not only for today, but as we go into the future. We do review positions through our budget review process. We do provide for a robust process there. And at the same time, I will tell you that in this past year, there have been a lot of positions that haven't been filled because of the financial shortfalls that we're talking about. So just to be clear, yes, there are programmatic considerations that we take with respect to budget constraints, but there are also direct personnel considerations that we take into account.
It's this side.
Was it that side? Okay, sorry.
My concern is with the fire department. A few days ago, the alarm went off in our building. Fortunately, we're one of the newer buildings because the first person that came was someone in a yellow shirt to check it out. He then called another person, and that man came down in a red golf cart. And then he was allegedly supposed to call the fire department. Now, if we had been in one of the older buildings, or if it hadn't been a false alarm, that building would have been really devastated. So that concerns me. And also, what happens in the off-season?
Shannon or John, do you want to talk about the process, the interaction between the institution and the fire department?
Sure. I'm, for those who don't know me, my name is Shannon Rosner, and I'm General Counsel and Senior Vice President of Community Relations. One of the areas I oversee is safety and security. I don't oversee the fire department because that's a county fire department whose house happens to be on our grounds. However, and if 911 had been called, then they would have responded directly. It sounds like what happened was the alarm went off. We happen to monitor many alarms, and many of you have given us permission in our safety and security department to monitor alarms. And so we responded to the alarm. We do an assessment to see if it's a false alarm, which it often is. And the same thing happens during the off season. Many of you have given us access to your homes. That's entirely your personal choice. In working in conjunction with the safety and security department if you want to do that. So that is our process to check. We do have an entirely volunteer fire department in Chautauqua County, and so they have asked that their resources be utilized that way, that somebody, because we have the safety and security department here first, to go check it out. I'm happy to speak more, but the process worked as it's intended. If you would like to meet to talk about a different way that you think that process should work, I'm happy to do so.
No, in prior times, the fire department came right away. That was what I was shocked at.
I'm not sure in this instance. If 911 was called, that would have been the fire department, so I'm not sure what happened here. I can't really speak without
I thought
that
the building
fact.
was automatically in there, but, okay, thank you.
Sure.
I'm wondering whether the strategic plan, now that we've had it 5 years, is driving resources away from the summer assembly, which could be leading to some of the difficulties with supporting the opera, et cetera. I mean, particularly the focus on alternative sources of income, the rest of the year, Washington, all of that.
Yeah, if you look at the actual financial numbers, we're not driving significant resources away from the summer. We've emphasized summer, especially as we're coming out of COVID, recognizing that is the purest part of our manifestation of our mission, where you see things like climate change. That's been done with outside philanthropy. That wouldn't come here for another programmatic purpose. I know that the Washington office is a lightning rod for some, maybe many. That office was, so just to clarify, that office costs $220,000 a year for its operation to be there. It has two purposes. One is to provide a place for almost about 10 folks now who call Washington, D.C. their home, to have a space to work. The other is to be a site for partnerships and convenings. I was excited to share the climate change initiative piece with you. Again, $6 million in new philanthropy. Our head of plan giving is based there. The pipeline has grown exponentially for what will come to Chautauqua Institution in deferred gifts, as is the head of our campaign, which we hope to go public with next year, which has already achieved, at this phase in its life, record levels of philanthropy. So the payback is there. The other piece that we hope to grow more into with it is the gatherings and convenings. We continue to meet with programmatic partners, many of whom are based in the Washington, D.C. area, including a really special project that we'll announce soon with PBS that will highlight a good chunk of what's happening at Chautauqua in the next year. So I would say in those places where we have added resources to things that are not the summer, they are designed to actually pull resources back into the institution's life and to help us in a really measured way grow out earned revenue. But we've not redirected resources in that way that is damaging the summer at the cost of those things.
Thank you.
If I could just add on, it's a very good question, and one that the board really engages in routinely. And I would say that I mentioned in my prepared remarks that we are about to engage now in a more systematic process of looking at the plan and setting the goals and the key performance indicators for the next 5 years. And those are exactly the questions that we ask ourselves. So I appreciate your question. It's a very good question, and one that is very much top of mind and always will be.
Thank you.
I live on James, and it is a direct route from the Massey down to the Athenaeum. We are having gigunda trucks come down our street. They cannot turn around. They are destroying the trees because they're so tall. We have little children running on our street. It is very unsafe. In past years, we suggested, and it came to fruition, that these trucks offload their merchandise onto smaller trucks once they get into the institution, because these large trucks are now backing up James Avenue because they cannot turn around. And I think that we need to do something about that. My other thought was, you talked about on your other problems that we're all here about, calling on the community to cooperate. There are many, many people in this audience who are quite capable of doing a lot of things that probably they would volunteer their services for, such as writing grants that we could use to sustain our opera, et cetera.
I'm going to ask John Shedd to come up and talk a little bit about trucks coming on and how we've been thinking about that. And thank you for the second offer. Feel free to send email if you want to volunteer in that way, and we'll get you connected to the right person.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Regarding the trucks that go down to the Athenaeum, those are all obviously providing supplies and materials for the Athenaeum typically. The solution we're trying to develop is part of the maintenance building project, the new building that we just constructed. We've put for future an area in that building to potentially receive materials and supplies from these larger vehicles up there across Route 394. And then we would store it in coolers or freezers up there. And then we would transport it down using other vehicles like low energy consumption vehicles, possibly electric. So that's in the plan. It hasn't evolved yet, but it is in the plan. So
previous years, we've used smaller refrigerated trucks, and it's worked.
Those are not our vehicles, and the Athenaeum Hotel has the possibility to negotiate contracts with these truckers that are bringing the food and beverage in. It's a very difficult process from what I understand. They're aware of it. They've they've approached it from many different angles. This year potentially may be different than previous years, I'm not sure. But we are trying to approach it from a standpoint of us taking over that process at some point in time to prevent some of those larger vehicles from coming down into the
We'd
campus.
appreciate it if you'd be proactive for this year.
Okay, well, thank you.
Michael, you fielded a question before about the concern of allocating resources away from core summer programs. I was looking at the 2022 financials, and an item I saw in there is enterprise activities. And in 2022, we spent about $4.2 million on that. Revenue corresponding was $3.6, so there was about a $500,000 shortfall. And in there, there's a line item, conference services, that we spent $1 million on. If you could provide some guidance, what is that, and is that contributing to the core program?
Yeah, thanks for that. And I'm going to ask Sebi to join me so I don't miss any of the enterprise activities. Much of that is the nomenclature for the hotel and the activities of the hotel and is not new. But Seb, do you want to come up and just kind of unpack enterprise activities, please?
Yeah, so first let me tell you what's in enterprise activities. As Michael said, some of the Rhodes Scholar off-season program is in there, a big chunk, as well as the bookstore. Those are the primary two big revenue pieces. That conference services expense you see is really an intercompany charge because the hotel does all of those services for those conferences. So the lodging, the food and beverage operations run through there. Why you're seeing the loss in 2022? Primarily because attendance was down at Rhodes Scholar, as well as attendance at the institution. When that happens, that impacts all of those Rhodes Scholar programs, particularly during the season. Remember, we were still living with pieces of COVID in the springtime as well, so attendance was down there. And the bookstore was obviously down because attendance was down during 2022.
So it's primarily Rhodes Scholars, the bookstore, and when we recover this year and next year, you see that coming level? It won't operate at a loss?
Yeah, our overall goal in that enterprise activity is to have a net contribution. So if we go back historically, not a huge contribution, but a net contribution, and that certainly is our goal in 2023 and in the future. When we talk about sustainability, that's one of the ratios we look at in order to determine where sustainability needs to be. And that is a ratio, and that's our goal.
That's a KPI?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, based on the recent announcement about the opera being impacted and budgeting cuts for programming, we know that some generous donors like Jane Gross and others are leaving the institution, selling their homes, and moving on. So how do we know that the savings of cutting these programs isn't going to be eaten up by the reduction in what donations they have been giving in the past and others alike?
So the most direct way I can answer your question is we don't know. We don't know until we get to the end of the year and we work through who is giving or not giving. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball on that. What I would say is that's one of the reasons the board has implemented multi-year budgeting, and they've got a series of markers that they've asked us to look at preseason, and we've held back a significant amount of expense should the summer assembly season not go as planned financially. We've got a series of expense levers we've held to make sure that we don't enter into another budget deficit. So, and if for whatever reason this year doesn't play out the way we expect, that informs the 2024 budget and the 2025 budget. That's why we're getting into this phase of multi-year budgeting.
And one follow-up question. I know the last few years there's been a lot of difficulty meeting the Chautauqua Fund, the yearly Chautauqua Fund. A lot of people I talk to have stopped giving, and these are homeowners, because they're not happy with the path which the institution is taking, and therefore no longer contributing. And the homeowners, based on what we heard earlier, is that we, as homeowners, are coming up with about 45% of the philanthropy dollars. So with the difficulty in moving forward with the with getting funding for the fund, what has been the proportion of reduction of giving to the fund from homeowners the last 2 and 3 years?
Is Jeff or Amy here to help me with the percentage piece? What I would say, one point of clarification. Last year is the only year we did not meet the fund. Every year the fund has gone up increasingly. Last year was the only year we missed. We did an analysis of that miss last year that we've been working through, and Jeff is, even with his knee problems, coming up here to do the percentage piece. So it's not accurate that we've had a series of declining years. Matter of fact, quite the opposite is true. We've had, up until last year, increasing philanthropy every year, year over year. We had quite a bit of new philanthropy last year. What it didn't come in was in the annually spendable category, which is where we're recalibrating and looking at our focus from this year. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff for more color commentary.
Yes, as Michael said, last year was the third time since 1948 that the Chautauqua Fund raised less money than the year before. I don't necessarily think one year is a trend, but we'll see. If we continue to have that challenge, we'll need to react to it and think differently about our approach, both in terms of fundraising within the fund, but also trying to understand the issues that have that cause us to not see a continuing increase. As to property owner giving, I don't think it's really as yet changed in any significant manner. Over time, the property owner giving has been right around 50% or less than 50%. And I don't know that last year's number varied greatly from that.
Hi, Phil Ehrman. Just as you talk about hoping that people can understand that the decisions you're making, agree or disagree, are coming from a position of love for Chautauqua, I think we should acknowledge that those wearing the I agree with Rick t-shirts are also coming from a place of love for this institution. I don't agree with Rick, but I did read the letter very carefully, and I think he made some very good points, and I appreciate those. Where it started to lose me is in the vitriol and the anger underlying that letter. It's an anger that started here back in the argument over the AMP, and it's only amplified. And I think that that is not helping us get to where we want to go. I used to live down the block from Laura Ingraham when I lived in Washington, D.C. We could not disagree on more things in the universe, but we raised our kids together. We spent many a day having an argument over a glass of Chardonnay in our kitchen while her kids were tearing up our playroom. And we always had a civil conversation. If the angriest woman in America and a liberal Jew from New York can have a civil conversation, then I think we need to also. And in the letter and in our conversations, I love to talk to people who disagree with me. And in those conversations over these last couple of years, I always come back to the idea, hearing the idea that, well, we didn't start it. It's the administration not being transparent. That's where it starts, not with us. For those who have kids, when our kids say to us, well, he started it, that's not usually the useful place for them to argue with us. And so wherever this argument started, this would be a very nice moment for it to end. I like your arguments and I like hearing them, but the vitriol behind them is losing us. And so let's try to walk out of here with the ideas, but leave some of the anger behind. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Leslie Zemsky, a homeowner here, and I actually sent you an email on what has been driving me crazy this summer, and I think of the gate pass, purchasing it, and the welcome center. It has the word welcome, but it's also the barrier. So I'm really hoping that, and I'd love to hear your observations on how you feel it's going, and is there any effort to move towards an all-digital system? Right now, I had my niece arrive last week after a 6-hour drive, and I bought her gate pass. I learned you can get it physically printed at will call like the old days, and she still had to go on a line and wait 45 minutes with a toddler. I have this summer, and I know other people are doing it, we just do our own personal will call. Someone from our family is arriving, we go walk up the gate pass. I like to buy the gate passes for my family and friends, and I want it to be a positive experience for them, so there isn't always time to mail it. So I really would encourage hiring maybe of a UX person. I'd like to know more about the whole website. It's not so easy to find where to buy a ticket. You go to a landing page, you have to click, you have to really look around. So this place should be so welcoming, and I think, I don't know if that ends up impacting attendance, because it is a barrier as it is right now.
Thanks, Leslie. And I see Emily Morris making her way over here, which is I'm grateful for. So, Emily, do you want to come up and talk through that?
Hi, Leslie. Hi, everyone. Thank you for that question. We are in the 4th iteration of a ticketing system in about as many years. And that search for a new ticketing system has been underway for much longer than that. And so I agree with you. The experience is not optimal, far from it. Digital is absolutely on our roadmap as early as next year. And some of that, you may recall receiving a communication asking you to submit your photograph. That's part of the process of enabling us to move to a digital format for gate passes. But it's been a challenge. Chautauqua is an extraordinarily complex place, as you all very well know. And being able to do all of the things that we do from a sales perspective in one system has been one of the great challenges of my life, I'll be quite frank. But we are finally with a partner that is working with us in a custom-built solution, but that is built in new and modern language that can evolve over time and can enable us to do the things that we want to do. You have been enormously patient. I can't be more grateful to you all for what you have tolerated over the past 4 years in particular, but for many years beyond that. Recognize that we share your vision, Leslie. We share all of your aspirations for a ticketing process that is welcoming and that is aligned with our mission and our vision to explore the best in everything. So thank you for your patience, and I'm right there with you.
Thanks. One quick follow-up. I would encourage, keep it simple. I love, okay, it's great you have the grounds pass, the go-to things, whatever, but simple, simple, simple would be, and maybe you'll lose a little revenue here, but maybe you'll gain revenue there, and just as a whole philosophy. And I know it's not simple, the behind the scenes.
Thank
so
you. Our developer would share that observation with you too. And we have attempted to streamline processes, but you're right. We're also adding new options to the mix too, because that's the yin and the yang that we deal with here, trying to be responsive to the various ways that people explore Chautauqua. But simplification is absolutely part of the process. Thank you.
My name is Molly Dunning, and I just have a quick, well, it's not quick, but here you go. I love this place, and it is a place. So I'm curious when we speak about positions not being filled due to budgetary constraints, but mention several fully funded philanthropic positions. And irregardless of what those positions are, I just kind of, how is this not just special interests dictating their priorities, which then affect how wider attention and resources are allocated? I'm a huge proponent of, you guys know the word. But should buying a job be the default as to what our priorities are as a community versus what they should be? So that's my question.
Yeah, thank you for the question. No donor has bought a job that we didn't want. So we in the strategic plan acknowledged that one of the existential threats of Chautauqua is if its audience didn't diversify, the place wouldn't survive. We implemented and outlined a position for a chief diversity officer, and philanthropists helped us to fund it so it wasn't a strain on our budget in the early years. We, in the strategic plan, noted that we wanted to find ways to continue conversations beyond the summer to beta test what it would look like to do year-round convenings. We had a donor approach us that said, "You had a wonderful summer week on climate. Would you like that to be the beta test?" Thank God, because what came after that we couldn't have seen was that we would get so heavily into lake research. For anyone that disagrees with us being on the lake and doing research there, if that dies, we will die. So that position taking over that, what we also couldn't see was New York State putting forward significant environmental mandates that this institution will be beholden to. Thank God Mark's there, he's picking up those things as well. So we don't have, I can't think of a position that we didn't want or need that a donor pushed us to do. The other thing I would say is Chautauqua has benefited for its entire life from people making restricted gifts to support specific activities. That's a lot of how philanthropy works and is getting more there. So just thanks for the opportunity to clarify. No donor has bought a position that we didn't want.
Two things, just to follow up on the technology side. I used to enter back 20 years ago, used to enter in all of the ticket sales and everything. So the advancement in the technology I know is very welcome there. And we just did a huge implementation on a system. We ended up in the Wall Street Journal. So I understand the complexity of it and it takes time. So, but one of the things that I have is across the street at the golf course, it's really been dilapidated in a sense. On the last 4 years, it seems like there's 4 new management companies out at the managing the Double Eagle. There's it's inconsistent. One of the things that I see, and I've heard a lot of the things, is connecting Chautauqua to the outside community here. What better place to do that than the golf course? You don't come through the gates. You can start there, and that's a place where more people that I've interacted up here, it's probably, I don't know the numbers, but over half the membership there is local community, and then you have the Chautauquans as well. And so just is there any, with the staffing up there, or the Double Eagle, is there anything in works or thoughts of, bulking that operation up potentially and using that as kind of a conduit to start, like I said, getting the group together? There's been multiple different initiatives put out there to help with that. So that's just, my question there.
Happy to talk about golf.
Yeah.
So one of the success stories, I think, coming out of the pandemic certainly is the revitalization of golf and attendance that's going on there. We've had some real success. I will tell you, it is about all of the work that had been going on ahead of that to build a quality courses, and we're seeing and reaping the benefits of all of that. We are disappointed in some of the patron experiences pieces of that, and particularly around food service. All the food service operations are struggling nationally, particularly here locally. That is one of our top priorities at the golf course, is to improve that experience that's there around food service. Related to your other questions, one of the things that technology is going to allow us to do is connect and integrate all of our systems to understand who our customers are in our database, to be able to see what they're doing and be able to expand on and grow their participation in all the activities at Chautauqua. That's my simple way. I'm sure Emily Morris could tell you a lot more about that and how that's going to work. This is a process around technology. This is a 4 to 5 year plan, and we need to be patient with how that's going to be rolling out. All of our systems were sitting on this AS400 for a really long time. Taking that apart carefully without blowing everything up is what the most difficult piece is. So more to come on that. Thanks about the golf course. We do have some work about pieces of the patron experience.
All right, thank you.
Folks, we are trying to keep this to an hour, and so we will take a question from this side and this side one more time, and then we also will be out in the Grove if you want to engage in further conversation, but we are going to have to eventually clear out this space to allow for future programming.
Hi, I'm Diane Hess. There's been talk today about the charter and what the charter says and doesn't say. Given the institution's financial distress, can you as the board guarantee us, without any ifs, ands, or buts, that there will not be assessment on the property owners in writing?
As you might well imagine, I cannot attest to that. It is not something that we have ever done in the history of my involvement in the board. It is something that is a part of Chautauqua and a part of being a property owner, but has never, ever been raised at the board table as a mechanism to address financial issues. So obviously it would be a decision of the board, and it would be obviously very undesirable to do that. And we have no intention of moving in that direction, but I obviously cannot make a commitment that we would never do that, because we have a governance responsibility with respect to our financial stability and our financial performance. But I can assure you that this has never even been an option that's been talked about or considered, and I don't anticipate that in the future as well. We are moving forward in a recovery process with respect to our finances that does not envision that, but instead envisions making the necessary changes with expense reduction, revenue growth, philanthropic growth, and performance improvements that lead us to financial sustainability, as well as what's encompassed in the strategic plan. So in no way is something like a property assessment, which has never been our radar screen, going to be used as a mechanism to achieve sustainability as we deal with these issues.
If I could just add one clarification, then we'll go here for our last question, and then again, we'll be available in the Grove. We talked about our miss in 2022. If you look at the financial statements, you'll actually see a slight increase in net assets because we used government programs that were designed for this exact reason. So PPP, ERP, shuttered venues, those federal grants were not designed to fatten the coffers of nonprofits. They were designed to help institutions get through this COVID period. We used those resources to get through last year. So when you look at our financials, you'll actually see a modest increase in net assets. So I just want to temper this Chautauqua is in financial distress language, because that's not an accurate description of where we are. What is accurate is if we don't look ahead and adjust for the future, we could end there. And that's why the board has implemented multi-year budgeting. Chautauqua's deficit last year was taken care of through government programs designed to do exactly that. So let's just reframe the notion that there's financial distress. That's not an accurate descriptor. And what we're doing now is to make sure we never get there.
Yes, just very, very briefly. I'm concerned and questioning why the antagonism towards ABC, because you won't even allow them a venue to have their speakers. And most of these speakers are not rabble-rousing deplorables. They're mostly history professors. If they have a political viewpoint, it's conservative. And the reason this all started was because most of the speakers of the main platform give a pretty liberal view, which is fine. And I'm just wondering why you couldn't work a little closer, particularly the latter part of the season. You've got a lot of open spots on the lecture platform to be announced. And yet ABC has Gordon Chang coming in a couple of weeks, a nationally known expert on China. He could have filled one of those spots. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Let me just clarify. I feel no animosity toward ABC. I guess the best analogy I would say is if what we've been trying to focus on, and we've heard from a lot of people this year, is that we've made some good progress in bringing more conservative speakers onto our platform. We will continue to try to do that. If someone disagreed with our theater company, I wouldn't spend our energies promoting another theater company. That's not what we do. Our job as administrators and as program people is to spend our time working as hard as we can to diversify our program. We're committed to it, but I don't feel any animosity toward ABC. I wish them well.
But you should make a venue available when they're available, like Smith Willis.
Yeah, our venues are tied up in more than people see. It's not an animosity issue. Thank you for everyone for coming today. I'm going to give Candy Maxwell the last word.
Michael, thank you. And just to remind you, we have a variety of ways in which you can continue to communicate with us. I've mentioned those as we opened. And we also will be available for a short period of time in the Grove for additional questions. Thank you very much for your time.